welcome to another episode of Streetpreneurpodcast, the podcast for innovative entrepreneurs. I'm Melvin McNeil, and I'm your host. Each week we have real conversations with entrepreneurs, small business owners, and also executives. And today I have a very special guest. She specializes in commercial real estate, and she is also the owner of AJT Law, LLC. And my guest today is Aisha Thomas. I hope I didn't pronounce that right.
Aisha J. Thomas.
Aisha J. Thomas. I forgot to mention the J,
right.
but we got that right. So we want to talk about everything concerning commercial real estate today. And those topics will include, some of the things in those topics will include legal pitfalls. We want to talk about negotiation. We want to talk about how to buy commercial property, how to sell commercial property, and all of the above. And I want to welcome you to Streetpreneur Podcast.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to come speak about CRE and its importance to us in the community. So Thank you.
All right, just tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, and how did you end up in these Atlanta real estate streets?
Okay. Well, I'm from the D, real D, from Detroit. I've been in Atlanta for 11, going on 12 years now. Started out in real estate over 24 years ago, right before I was graduating from undergrad. Really just all the autobiographical information I've read about people who were wealthy. The common component was always they owned real estate. So that's what kind of sparked my interest where I was reading. So I said, let me go get a real estate license. So that was just my first foray into just learning about real estate, and then eventually started doing deals. So I always kind of just had been on the fringes of real estate early on, still worked other jobs until we made it a full-time thing within the last 10, 12 years.
Okay. Just want to look at some of your accolades. There's so many to mention. We also know you were named one of Georgia's super lawyers, Rising Star for 2023, 2024, and also 2025. Yes. And also definitely want to recognize you for the Connect Media, the CRE Top 50 Lawyer in Real Estate for 2020, and also the year of 2024.
Yes.
What did you contribute to? What is your secret to constantly being a winner in the real estate market? We want to talk about that.
Well, the secret in terms of in regards to those accolades is, other people have to nominate you. You can't those aren't self-nominated. So it's definitely an honor to be considered a rising star among my legal peers.
Yes.
And then also clients. So in particular, another attorney that I've worked with on several deals nominated me for both of those at the time. And after you get in once, I guess they just keep analyzing you and determine whether you can be selected, multiple times. So, but yeah, it's definitely an honor to be recognized in an industry that's less than 2%, less than 3% of minorities in commercial real estate. So it's not a lot of us in commercial real estate at all, whether it's on the legal, brokerage, property management side, any of that. So it's definitely an honor.
Right. And let's just talk about what it is that you do on a daily basis.
Okay.
Exactly, for those that don't know, please explain to them exactly what a commercial law firm does.
Okay. Well, commercial real estate law firm. What I do is I focus on closings. Now, I also do residential, but I market myself specifically commercial because there's not a lot of options in terms of representation that looks like you. So on the commercial side, we do closings, we do land use and zoning. One of my sweet spots is definitely on the leasing side because we all know, all of our entrepreneurs out here, we all think we know contracts because we do contracts and negotiate every day. Oh, I can negotiate my own lease. And everybody comes to me after the fact when it's a problem. So I implore people to get, at least if you're not represented by an attorney, at least get a real estate broker to assist you with your commercial leases, doing everything from industrial, office, multifamily, hospitality, if representing restaurants, retailers, beauty industry, medical. I have quite a few doctors who are clients and even fellow lawyers. So leasing, closings, land use and zoning, a lot of just contract negotiation, entity formation, helping people set it up. And I do some simple estate planning, meaning wills, trust, healthcare directives. So these are things that just kind of line up with when people are setting up real estate companies and investments.
Right. Let's kind of touch on the lease agreements. Just what are some of the mistakes that you see that investors make, and like you said, business owners who feel like I can do this myself.
Right.
What are just some of the pitfalls that they need to avoid, or some of the things they need to do that needs to be negotiated within those contracts that you see them making mistakes all the time?
Okay, well, the first one I
It's kinda like
already
a
kind of
double question.
mentioned. Right, the
Yeah,
first one I
well, you already
mentioned
mentioned, yeah.
is definitely having some representation, because even though you negotiate contracts, you got to remember the landlord is in the business of real estate. So they do this every day. A lot of times when you go to sign a lease, they're going to come to you with a template lease that they've already drafted. They know inside and out. And depending on whether it's a mom and pop landlord versus a national landlord management company, you know, the flexibility is gonna vary, and there may not be a lot of room to negotiate when you're trying to go into maybe a regional mall or a strip center. It really just depends on who owns it. So representation is important. Even if you don't have a broker, at least get somebody look that contract over. So some of the mistakes I see is people not accounting for time. A lot of times, especially if you have build out requirements, you know, with commercial, you're responsible for everything. And people go in not realizing that they're responsible for taxes, insurance, if anything breaks, a light bulb goes out, you can't call like you do if it's a regular residential lease for them to come fix it. No, it's on you, even to, you know, do the lawn maintenance outside. That usually everything falls, and it's different types of leases. So you got to know if you have a triple net lease, if you have a gross lease. So understanding your type of lease you have is another pitfall, because that usually indicates what your responsibilities are. So make sure you have representation, understanding the type of lease you have, and your rights and duties in those leases, as well as another one is, like I said, when it's build out requirements, people usually forget to account for what happens when there's delays, what happens when there's an issue with getting material. They may give you some rent abatement, but guess what? You still gonna have to pay that rent even if you're not open. And that's where a lot of people struggle, where it's like, well, wait a minute, I can't open because of these outside forces. Landlord is like, hey, you got to pay me the rent. I gave you a month or 2 months. So negotiating in advance to try to account for some of those things is imperative.
Right. You also mentioned one thing that I feel like our listeners will want to know. What is a triple net lease?
Well, a triple net lease is a lease that basically says that as the tenant, you're responsible for net. So meaning the rent, the insurance, the maintenance, all of that. So whereas like we're in an office park, right? Typically office leases are modified or gross leases. So usually with an office lease, because there's several tenants involved, you pay your rent, and the only thing it covers taxes, insurance, and even in some offices it may cover some of the maintenance. Whereas with a triple net, no maintenance is covered. Nothing is covered. It's all on you, basically.
Okay. Let's kind of touch on the broker side.
Okay.
Exactly what do you do on the broker?
Okay.
As far as people contacting you looking for properties, or just kind of tell us your day-to-day as far as on the broker side.
Okay. Well, on the broker side, my sweet spot is, for years I've represented mostly investors, but definitely homeowners, and tenant rep and investment sales, meaning people who are trying to get into the commercial leasing or purchase some commercial property, whether it's multifamily or a building. So on the day-to-day, I'm licensed. My company, the brokerage, is called the Thomas Agency, and I'm licensed in Michigan and Georgia, and I'm also a salesperson in California. So on the day-to-day on that, I do have agents that work for me. And, you know, we do everything from, we deal with a lot of probate property, as far as listing probate property and listing property for investors, and just helping our investors build their portfolios. So our thing is we build legacies one property at a time by helping investors understand what their requisite requirements are for whatever investments. And that's the big thing. People need to know. Everybody say, oh, I want to buy real estate, but they don't have any parameters on how much money you require it to make, you know, what's your cap rate, because there's a lot of factors you want to consider when determining whether a purchase is going to meet your investment goals. So that's what we do on the broker side.
On the broker side, yeah. Let's talk about tax strategies. What are some good tax strategies for investors that are looking to invest in commercial properties?
Okay. Well, I will say this. I am not a CPA.
Okay. Put the disclaimer.
We have to put the disclaimer out there.
I didn't think about that. You're right.
I am not a CPA, so
your personal opinion.
Right. This is my personal opinion, not even illegal. Nothing I say here is legal advice.
Yes. That's true.
Unless you're gonna send me a retainer.
Right. We'll talk about
right. So nothing here is legal. Should be construed as legal advice or tax advice. Always seek out a professional in your area.
Yeah.
But as far as some tax strategies, there's definitely what I see a lot of investors who don't take advantage of. They don't take advantage of 1031 exchanges.
And what is that?
What a 1031 exchange is, where it allows you to defer capital gains when you sell something. You usually have to involve a accommodator who will hold those funds, and those funds have to be taken and put into another property.
Okay.
So a lot of people don't take advantage of that. I've seen several people sell this house or this property they've had forever. They just so excited they got this big profit, but then next thing you know, this tax bill is going to be associated with it, where you at least could have deferred it. And especially with commercial, there's a lot of ways you can write down your tax liability based on depreciation of the property. And, these are things that you would definitely say get a reputable tax CPA person who knows real estate, because everybody still doesn't know real estate. Just same with attorneys. You get people say, well, I had an attorney look over my lease. I had one, and it's usually a cousin that do criminal law, So there's nuances in every, industry that, the general public may not recognize. So, taking advantage of 1031 exchanges are paramount if you are a repeat investor, or even if you and a lot of people think, oh, well, for me to do a 1031, I got to be, selling some $1 million property. The typical 1031 exchange is on properties under $500,000. So it's a strategy that whatever price range or value of your property, you can take advantage of. So that's one. Another one, of course, is holding the property in certain entities where you can write it off as a business. Instead of in your personal name, so that reduces your personal tax liability. And for your company, you can write off everything. So those are a couple ways, some tax strategies in terms of when you're owning property. But a big one that I feel like we don't take advantage of is 1031s all day.
Okay. Let's talk about here in Atlanta. You see a lot of the downtown and a lot of new commercial developments that are taking place, and you also see some existing properties that's been sitting for years. Why do they let the properties sit for years? And why do they not finding new tenants to move in, or are they just holding the property out to a right investment group come along and purchase the commercial property? Just kind of give us your opinion on it.
It's a little bit of both, I think. I've had clients who are, let's say they see a building, they drive by it.
Yeah, they like it. Yeah.
I need to get in this building. I want to lease it. I want to buy it. And they'll find that, the landlord may want a certain amount or certain price that may be, beyond their budget. And they'll say, well, I'm willing to pay this. It's been sitting empty for
X number
3 years. Why won't they at least, entertain this offer? And I had to explain to people that commercial real estate is valued based on the income it produces. So for some landlords, not all, but for some landlords, they would prefer to keep it empty and write it off as a loss than to lease it to you under market value. Because then depending on if they have a mortgage, they have to have a certain debt service coverage ratio. So if they lease it up 100%, but it's all undervalued rents, they're not going to meet a certain requirement by their bank. So it's easier to say it's empty, I can write that off, versus now I brought down the value of my building by leasing it, and it's leasing it at under market rates, and so the total value is less now. So you get what I'm saying? So that may be the reason why you see some buildings for lease forever and they won't budge on the prices or anything, because it may be requirements in their financing, or they just don't want to bring the value down by the income, meaning the income down, which in turn brings the value down.
Okay, good. That'll help clarify things. A lot of people want to know that.
Yeah, or people, like you say, are just holding out. They hold
until,
it, until they get the right offer, or they determine. I have clients who've leased property and ended up not doing anything with it, and they just paid the rent on time, obviously, because they didn't own it, but you know, depending on some landlords, that could be a breach of the lease if you never open up. But you know, so it just depends on what your strategy is, and but those buy and hold folks, they're usually waiting on a certain right market conditions before they decide to sell it, redevelop it, or whatever the case may be.
Okay. And what are few of the newest trends that you see in the marketplace right now is concerning commercial real estate?
Well, commercial real estate is down right now due to the higher interest rates.
Right.
But some of the trends I'm seeing in general are a lot of conversions, meaning like you're seeing more mixed use, and you're seeing old properties being converted, like old office buildings being converted into residential. So it's twofold, whereas they're using this to attack some of the housing shortages that we have across the country. So that's been a big thing you're seeing is conversions from commercial to residential properties. Another thing that people aren't probably aware of, but effective December 1st, 2025, this is more so on the residential side, but it applies to entities where people like myself, industry professionals, title companies, lawyers, we're going to be required to report any non-finance deals to FinCEN.
Okay. What do you mean when you said non-finance?
Cash.
Cash only.
Cash only deals are going to have to be reported to FinCEN when you sell a residential property to an entity or a trust.
Okay.
So if they're buying cash, now we got to basically snitch.
Right. Report
you know,
to the IRS.
Right. Basically, you know, we're doing not the IRS, FinCEN, but we know all of that stuff is they're collecting this information for a reason. You know, they're saying that this is to prevent fraud and scam. Fraud and all that, and bad players from out of the country. You know, but. Yeah, that could be debated on how, you know, invasive that is. So
that's true. And what are some of the current trends you see now in residential?
Well, that's
a big one.
You
mentioned about the apartment new. I see a lot of new apartment complexes being built all throughout the city. So,
well, what trend I'm seeing as far as from a legal aspect is, you know, as we know over the last 10 years, especially here in Atlanta, that large corporations own probably like 60,000 properties that are rentals.
Yes, they do.
And they're instead of building to sell, a lot of corporations now are building to rent. So they're trying to create renters, which, you know, since they bought up all this property over the last 10 years, they were competing against the mom and pop investor, other investors, or even just the regular first time and home buyers, right? So they were outbidding everybody and made it a lot more difficult to attain home ownership. You know, our rates in terms of as a community have went down. So this is a trend you're seeing that's not good. That it's now less of us own properties, own homes.
So what would you recommend to, like you said, lower investors, buy and flip investors? What do you think they should do now? But since they've gotten squeezed out of that market, what would you recommend that they do, or look for other investments inside of real estate?
Well, obviously, if you don't have the capital,
right,
you might need to partner now. You know, I've been seeing I'm part of a couple of groups where
investment groups.
Yeah, where we've partnered together to buy a building or buy multiple properties. So, you know, those are ways to kind of leverage all of our money. So it's more of the group economic model. And, you know, setting those structures up correctly with the correct legal, because then you get into securities issues if you're collecting folks' money and telling them they're going to get a certain return and all that. So you have to be mindful of securities laws. But overall, just to combat that, it would definitely be to buy together and get more involved politically, because, you know, in Georgia, they've tried to pass a few laws to kind of hinder or slow this down. Now, of course, it's a balance between that, and we don't want to infringe, because once you infringe on their ability to buy, then guess who it trickles down to? Possibly us. So it's a slippery slope. But still, getting involved politically, where maybe there are more rules and regulations put on these large landlord owners, you know. But that's a trend that's not that great. Hopefully, interest rates will be coming down, and so that'll increase the amount of buyers. However, inventory is still pretty low right now, because those people who had those great interest rates, 2020, 2021, 23, even if their houses appreciated, they sell it. They can't afford to buy anything comparable right now, at least, you know.
It's the same value.
Their buying power has decreased, even if you do have equity. So one of the things to combat, stop selling grandma's house.
Right.
I know we've probably all heard this before. Is stop selling grandma's house. Get your estate planning together, because that's how a lot of us, in terms of minorities, Black and brown communities, lose wealth by not having proper estate planning. And you got 15 people on one house. Who's responsible?
Yeah, that's true.
Then one person sells it to an investor, and then they can force a sale, and therefore the wealth is lost. And usually when that happens, those are under market. So.
Okay. Is there any other special projects that you're working on or currently involved with right now that you want to leave with the general public to know right now?
Well, I do have an ebook, and this is more so geared to people who have an interest in commercial real estate. It's called Getting to the 1%, and it just kind of chronicles my journey into commercial. And just provides a resource. And it's kind of all the information I wish I had in one place when I was first interested, meaning, the organizations, what type of volunteer work you can do. So that's my ebook. You can find it on my website, aishajthomas.com, or hit me on Instagram, Aisha J. Thomas. Right. Yeah. I'm also a speaker on the upcoming Flipology in July. Flipology. So I'm a speaker on their panel. I'll be talking about commercial real estate there too.
Is that
in July? And that's going to be in Atlanta.
Here in Atlanta. Okay. Yeah. Tickets on sale currently? Or?
Not yet. So just kind of keep your eye out. We'll definitely be posting about that, and you'll see it.
And leave them with your contact information, those who are interested in investing or
legal work.
Or legal work.
Get some representation
first. Yeah.
Right. Well, like I said, everything can be found at www.aishajthomas.com, and that'll provide a link to my law firm. That'll provide a link to any products that I have. The brokerage, you can get a free real estate consultation on the brokerage side. Legal consultations are not free, but definitely do free brokerage consultations. So you can find me there on Instagram by my name, the law firm by ajtlawfirm.com, and the Thomas Agency as well.
All right. We want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today in the studio.
Okay.
And I'm sure my audience have heard everything, so I hope you all learned a lot today, especially concerning commercial real estate and also on the representation side of what it is that you need to do. Please subscribe to the channel, and we're going to see you on our next episode of Streetpreneur Podcast.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right.